Would you rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance.
Mayor Collins, would you like me to call roll?
Please.
City Attorney Joden?
Here.
City Manager Cortez?
Present.
City Commissioner Halliday?
Present.
Commissioner Wicks?
Present.
Commissioner Noonan?
Present.
Commissioner O'Loughlin?
Here.
Mayor Collins?
Here. Our regular City Commission minutes were received November 4th. Are there any corrections to be made? If not, the minutes will stand as submitted. Consent agenda claims. Madam?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, we have a number of items in the consent agenda. So before I go into detail, there has been a request to pull item 4C, which is the item pertaining to resolution of intention to establish an updated fee schedule for the 2020 golf season at Bill Roberts Golf Course. And also item 4D, resolution establishing a tax increment financing advisory board for the downtown urban renewal. We have some amendments on those two items, so we would request your authorization to move those as part of the regular agenda so that they would become items 4C will become 12C, and item 4D would become 12D. That would leave two items under consent. So let me start with the first one. Is it okay for us to move 4C and 4D to the regular items? I'm sorry, 11.
So,
Okay, so then we're moving, Madam Clerk, we are moving items 4C and D under regular items, so that's number 11. That would leave two items under consent. One is the claims. We have two items in your packets. One is for $636,392.68. The other one is for $1,412,369.04. The second item is enlargement of wastewater service area for the Red Elder Residences at 2200 Henderson Street. Both items are administrative in nature, which is why we put them under consent.
okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move approval of consent agenda item A, claims, and B, enlargement of wastewater service area for the Red Alder Residences at 2200 Henderson.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Halliday?
We'll just check for public comment real quick.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. Any from the public? Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Halliday?
Aye.
Commissioner Wicks?
Aye.
Commissioner Noonan?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Loughlin?
Aye.
Mayor Collins?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay. Bid awards for the Memorial Pool Liner Replacement Project. And that's for Parks.
Mayor, Commissioners, this is a bid award for the Memorial Park Pool Liner. The Memorial Pool PVC liner is due for replacement. It's showing signs of failure. They are only effective for 10 years and they need to be replaced. We did receive 3 bids for the PVC liner. In response to our request for proposals, or request for bids on September 27th, 2019. The lowest responsible bidder for the project was Aquatic Renovation Systems of Indianapolis with a bid price of $132,000. We recommend considering this award for contract for Aquatic Renovation Systems for the project amount of $132,000.
Discussion from the commission? Public? I'll entertain
Mayor,
more.
I will make a motion. I'll move to award the Memorial Pool Liner Replacement Project, PR 9913, to the lowest responsible bidder, Aquatic Renovation System, Inc., in the amount of $132,020.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Halliday?
Aye.
Commissioner Wicks?
Aye.
Commissioner Noonan?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Loughlin?
Aye.
Mayor Collins?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Communications, proposals from the commissioner. Anybody, any commissioner have anything to say? Discuss? Okay. Report from the city attorney?
Nothing on that agenda item 7, Mayor and Commission, but if, with your permission, I'll just jump straight to item number 8, litigation strategy.
Please.
The city manager has been notified of a potential lawsuit involving Subsector Solutions. I'm going to refer to them by their doing business as named Treasure State Internet and Telegraph. I think that's what most of us are familiar with them as. TSI&T, Treasure State Internet, has offered to discuss a resolution of this potential lawsuit prior to its filing in district court. The complaint generally, without getting into details right now, alleges that the city unlawfully interfered with Treasure State's installation of infrastructure necessary to deliver internet services. For anyone who's not familiar, TSI&T is an internet service provider that provides broadband internet through fiber optic networks. That fiber optic network infrastructure generally has to be installed in city rights of way, and TSI&T desires to install some of that infrastructure in city rights of way. There are 3 counts alleged in the draft complaint. The first is negligence and negligent representation. That's basically alleging that the city failed to act in a reasonably prudent manner in considering Treasure State's proposal. Count 2 is tortious interference with business, and this is basically an allegation that the city interfered with some business relationship that Treasure State currently has or may have in the future. And then the third is constructive fraud, that the city allegedly misrepresented a material fact and Treasure State relied on that misrepresentation. I did this afternoon reach out to the attorney representing Treasure State, and she did offer, I was looking for a little bit more direction or ideas on what she had as far as proposals for resolution. She didn't have time to engage in that discussion this afternoon, but she did relay that her and her client would be interested in sitting down with the manager and myself to discuss that, knowing that, and without, or rather not knowing that, I don't have a strong recommendation other than it's probably best that we do take them up on the offer for the manager and myself to meet with Treasure State and their attorney to get details on what they believe the options are towards resolution. There's not a lot of specific allegations in the complaint and almost no discussion of what potential remedies are other than monetary damages. So at this time, I would seek direction from the commission on how the commission wants to proceed. In terms of process here tonight for deciding that, depending on the nature of the discussion the commission wants to get into, you may be able to close the meeting. I'm not sure that we have that level of detail that justifies that tonight. But if you wouldn't mind, please discussing that, and then I can think about it and make a recommendation on whether to close the meeting or not.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Comments from the commission?
So, I mean, my thought is, given how little we know about this and the stages of it today, I think it would be best to let Mr. Joden continue those conversations with counsel for TSI and T, bring back basically what those discussions are, and I think we can then, at that point, talk about an executive session potentially that would allow us to discuss anything that would pertain to litigation strategy and attorney-client privilege. But I don't see any need to close this meeting tonight or get too far down a rabbit hole of questions on this, given how little we know at this juncture.
I agree with Commissioner Halliday in that, because we have no idea what's going on, and so meet with them and let's see where we go from there. Any other comments from the commission?
No, I would agree. Thank you.
I don't know, Mayor, if there's anybody, we just take any public comment.
Okay. Is there any comments from the public concerning this lawsuit? And the public is pretty quiet tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The manager and I will reach out with TSIT through their counsel and get a little bit more detail and come back before the commission.
You bet. Thanks. Report from the city. Report from the city manager.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I have a few items. Let me begin by introducing you, Pat Judge. Pat, if we can ask you to come forward, just to make sure that the commissioners know you. Pat is our new sustainability coordinator. Today was his first day, actually. And so I wanted to just make sure that we had an opportunity to introduce him formally. Pat.
Thank you, Mayor Collins and City Manager Cortez and members of the commission. I'll just be very brief, but again, my name is Patrick Judge, and started in the sustainability coordinator position today, and the onboarding is complete, and I'm eager to get going. I wanted to thank you all for your vision in creating this position, and thank you for your opportunity, the opportunity you've extended me to help the city achieve its sustainability goals. And I would just remind you that it is a half-time position, and like Commissioner Noonan, I split my time over at Carroll College, and so I'll be working, I teach over there in the mornings as an adjunct, and I'll be working afternoons in the city. My office is going to be 4th floor, top of the stairwell near the elevator there. So looking forward to working with you all, and thank you again. If you have any questions?
Well, on behalf of the commission, we say welcome to the city.
Great.
And hope your stay will be fruitful.
All right. Thank you.
Commissioners?
Yeah, just to welcome Mr. Judge, and glad to have you on board. And I don't know if there's anyone we could have hired that might have more knowledge of the existing plan that Helena generated back in 2009. So it's pretty exciting that you'll be able to hit the ground running and at least figuring out where we are. And you've been doing your own independent work. So thank you so much. Glad to have you here.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
So continuing with my report, a couple of other items. We have the Parade of Lights on November 29th. And let us know if you want to be in the float. Let us know as soon as possible. We're trying to wrap this up by this week to make a determination if in fact we will have a city float or not. And it's November 29th, which is a Friday. It'll be in the evening. Wanted to also update you on the Big Sky event that Northwestern Energy has sponsored. As you may recall, we asked you for directions on how to proceed with that. Currently, our sustainability coordinator and also Amanda Oppitz will be attending that meeting. And one of the questions that we need to begin to think about is what goals, aspirations, or agenda items the commission would like to see in that retreat. And again, it's all about sustainability. So if there are specific goals, aspirations, agendas, items that you would like to see, please let us know, so we will incorporate it. I've indicated to Pat that I'm looking at his expertise in this matter to really guide the work that the city will be doing. So it's not so much that I'll be giving him direction. I think he will giving me direction on where we're going. And so here's another item where we just want to make sure that we hear from the commission if you have specific discussions that you want to see at that retreat. As far as on the 13th, so last Wednesday when we got together, you requested information regarding the functioning of your advisory boards. And these are the boards and commissions that provide counsel to you as a body to the City of Helena Commission. And so we took the marching order seriously. As you know, we had already been engaged on a number of activities. I'm going to let Director Ponoso to provide you information regarding the process that we have adopted, and of course to answer any questions you may have. So Director Ponoso, if you would like to please join us in that. After you're done, that'll be the conclusion of my report.
Thank you, Madam Manager.
Mayor, Commissioners, As you are aware, the Parks Department currently staffs multiple advisory boards and committees, including the Helena Open Lands Management Advisory Committee, the City County Parks Board, the Golf Advisory Board, and the Civic Center Board. We have been engaged with the community. We held a public meeting on November 15th that I believe Commissioner Noonan attended as well to solicit feedback from advisory boards and the public. The meeting was well attended. There were about 50 people, mostly advisory board members, but other members of the public as well. We currently have an open public comment period. We have a survey form on our website where we've had about 38 responses to that, and that we're going to keep that open until November 29th. We did receive a report today from our facilitator who facilitated the meeting on Friday with consolidated comments from that meeting. We've also had discussions with our advisory boards, with the chairs and the advisory boards themselves to solicit feedback from them on thoughts that they have on efficiencies and better ways we can run our advisory boards. So I'll give you a little, some pieces of what we're hearing, what we heard at the public meeting and what we're hearing on our online survey. Generally, we've heard throughout this process that there's concern from advisory boards that consolidation could dilute the work, interest, and effectiveness of their specific boards, as well as reduce opportunities for public involvement. These board members are often engaged in these boards specifically because of their focused interest in a specific subject matter or facility. This is what we're hearing. My park staff report value in some of our specialized advisory boards. Their value is most apparent when we have a specific problem we're trying to solve or an issue we need guidance on and support from a particular community. We've also heard from those who see value in the City County Parks Board playing a bigger role, specifically in open lands, because open lands are a regional asset in 2 counties. We've also heard at the public meeting and in the online survey that there could be value in consolidation of boards if it was carefully considered and implemented, or have one board as an acting clearinghouse for all boards to triage input. We are looking specifically at, we have citizens who serve on these boards who dedicate hundreds of hours of volunteer work, the board members and the chairs. They give of their time and provide feedback, attend meetings, and generally stay engaged in our work. Our recreation staff dedicates many hours of work and energy into support and involvement in these boards as well. Advisory board involvement and guidance is significant for the work that we do, and with all the time and resources spent, it is important to make sure that all of our efforts are meaningful and effective. We do spend a significant amount of time staffing these boards, generally approximate numbers. For all the boards that we staff, for our clerk and administrative hours, we spend on average 28 to 30 hours a month of administrative staff time. This includes agendas, minutes, setup, venues, communication, coordination, meeting attendance, website posting, etc. We do spend staff hours staffing these boards as well. This includes agenda review, minute review, setup, venues, communication with boards, coordination with boards, meeting preparation, and meeting attendance. We spend about approximately 24 hours a month of time dedicated to those boards for staff time. We also are very involved in other boards like the Helena Citizens Council, the Helena Public Arts Commission, and other boards that are not city-sponsored, such as Kay McKenna Youth Foundation, the 6th Ward Garden Park, Growing Friends, and Bike Walk Helena, Montana, and many others. We spend approximately 18 hours a month on non-park specific city boards, or non-city boards outside the Parks Department. The commission, I believe, also spends a significant amount of time attending these boards, and it's often challenging to attend the amount of boards and board meetings that we have. Some of the board overlap that I'd like to point out, or as I would like to think of it, opportunities for collaboration, includes fee schedules. All of our boards work on fees. They work on those separately, but there's a possibility for them to work on them together and more collaboratively. There's overlap between our Open Lands Board and our City County Parks Board on many issues, with significant portions of City County Parks Board time spent discussing open lands issue. There's overlap with law enforcement issues, discussions on emerging recreation trends and issues, and overlap specific to biking and new technology issues. There's also overlap or opportunities for collaboration where we discuss budget and operating issues and efficiencies, such as concessions, and that would be specific to the golf course and the Civic Center. So there are a lot of opportunities to realize efficiencies. We can gain a lot of administrative and staff efficiencies in a number of ways, including audio-only minutes, board-taken minutes, board-generated agendas, quarterly or every other month meetings, and consistent form and function of the boards. We can also more clearly define appropriate roles and responsibilities. The roles and responsibilities of the boards can be enhanced by specific board training, consistent appropriate bylaws and or resolutions for the governing boards, and proper staffing and guidance by my staff. We can increase diversity in the citizens and resources these boards represent, and that can be achieved through term limits, consistent and uniform board resolutions and bylaws, and broader outreach for recruiting, representation, and appointments on boards. Specifically, you asked us to look at consolidation of our boards, which could take many forms and could increase efficiency and enhance effectiveness of these boards and the open lands staff support of these boards. Consolidating boards could enhance and elevate board effectiveness by having boards that consider and advise on issues from a broader parks and community perspective.
Thank you, Ms. Espinoza. Comments from the... just one question. I know you just outlined some approaches that the board could use. Have you suggested these things to the board, the various boards, like board-generated agendas and minutes and all of that?
These are conversations that we have had. These are also comments that we received on the online survey and at the public meeting. So we haven't specifically I haven't specifically talked to every board about that, but it is conversations that are being had.
Thank you. Comments from, yes, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Espinoza, I just want to underscore your inclusion of the commission in this. What I've seen in the past 4 years is that a commissioner involvement is often very important for boards, because that's a way that the agenda or attention needed for different issues happens. But the fact that most commissioners in one way or the other deal with 4 or more boards, and a lot of them meet during the day. So I often have been on the boards that meet during the day because they have a little more flexible schedule. But that for people who work full-time with all the other volunteer time that they give it to the commission, it becomes difficult. So I think it is important to consider that too. And some of the boards often feel a little bit alone or not sure that their voice is heard if they don't have that very immediate connection with the commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any others?
So, thank you. I think you answered most of the questions that I was going to ask. I probably don't need any more answers from you. Maybe just a couple comments to the commission and thoughts. So I think we should probably just keep moving forward on having those conversations about what those efficiencies are. Ultimately, I think we are going to have conversations about if some of these boards make sense anymore, whether a different board needs to be formed out of them. And I was thinking about boards that I've served on over the last 6 years, and I've thought about the boards that have been most effective, and I've thought about the boards that have been the least effective, or at least during that time, because we create these boards as a commission, And they ebb and flow. There have been boards that have been eliminated before, and there have been new boards that have been created in my time on the commission. And, I was thinking of boards that I've seen as the most effective, and I'd probably put, in terms of commission-created boards, a board like Non-Motorized Transit Advisory Council, who were instrumental in pushing forward the Centennial Trail, have been instrumental each year in making budgetary recommendations to the commission. I think have been a centerpiece in why we've been doing the Safe Routes to Schools work that this commission has contributed to over the last year. I think that's a board that has been active. They do it on a shoestring, really, when it comes down to it. But they have pushed projects that you don't notice. The new sidewalks on Fee Street that are moving people from north of Highway 12 to Pureview, which are so incredible from a non-motorized standpoint, but also an equity standpoint. These ideas originated with that board because that's a board that generates these ideas, brings them forward to the commission and says, we're advising you to get them done. I look at the Public Arts Commission, which a few years ago was in relative, I wouldn't say defunct, but it certainly was looking for a direction, and I think Commissioner Noonan probably could say better than me, but their work over the last couple years has been pretty incredible to watch. The projects they've been pushing, the work that they are doing, both on, whether it's the wrapping boxes, which is being done, to actually pushing for much larger scale sculpture work around town, and also taking care of existing projects, bringing those recommendations to us, getting the authority to go forward with RFPs. It's been an effective board. I balance that with some of the boards that I look at today that I don't think have been effective, at least objectively, right? Because at the end of the day, boards don't exist for the sake of boards existing. They exist for the sake of providing recommendations to this commission, providing an outlet for information between citizens and the city, but ultimately they have to be serving the interests of the city. Otherwise, they're not necessarily providing a value. And so the reason I had brought up boards like golf and Holmac the other night was that golf, in my time on this commission, has been virtually silent. When I asked for some recommendations that we'd received from them, in a very short response, I got stuff going back to 2010 because it's a relatively quieter board. Does that mean we don't need to have people discuss golf stuff? No. But does it mean there might be a better venue to do it? Absolutely. And those are important questions to ask, because as we create new boards, we shouldn't be just making more boards and making it more difficult for our staff members. So to me, it's the objective data. It's not someone telling me I should be on this board, I like being on this board, I've been on this board. It's telling me what is the value that that board is actually bringing to this commission and to moving policy forward. And so as we have those discussions, I think it's important that we as the commission challenge ourselves and our boards to remind us why they're relevant, why are they providing, what's their value added to the Helena community as a whole. The same thing goes for Holmac in the sense that we've removed one of the central pieces from Holmac at this point, which was trails policy. And Holmac is largely performing maintenance advisory capacities for open lands. We have a lot of maintenance departments in this city. We do street maintenance, Parks has maintenance, water, sewer, all do maintenance. We don't have separate advisory boards for them. So I think it's an important question as we move forward with the rewrite of our Parks and Open Lands Plan, talking about the trails piece. Where do those Holmac tasks reside, and does it really make sense to continue to have a board with a significant substantive piece? So those are my general thoughts on sort of moving forward where I think we should be looking at. I don't think anything should be made with regards to those boards tonight, but I think that hopefully that will frame discussions. That does bring me, though, to one board that I would urge this commission to think about consensus on moving forward with, is that I think we need to give the city manager consensus to put up the Civic Center board to be dissolved at the manager's discretion to bring that resolution before us. That's one that I have watched objectively in the time that I've been on this commission and over this past year. And as a commissioner who is relying on a board to provide me objective advice as to how to run this, to assist with the Civic Center, that board ceased to have that ability, and it's ceased to do that task. And I don't see any further discussion on it, and so it's my approach, it's my thought that we need to dissolve that board at this point.
Any other comments from the commission?
Mayor, I will just add, I think that that's a helpful way to frame this conversation. I do think, and I appreciate the Parks Director providing some ideas for how we might create some efficiencies with some of these boards, and I do think that our update to the open lands plan, I think my hope is that will bring about some further conversation about the role that Holmac plays. I think there is no doubt there is a set of very dedicated individuals that care a lot about our open lands, and I think it's just a question of how does the rewrite of the recreation plan align with a body, an advisory body in that capacity. And so I look forward to further conversations about that. I also have deep concerns about some of the interactions that we've had with the civic center board specifically, and I think ultimately it is a question of is this the right structure? I think there's no question that they've served an important role in the past, but I do think it's worth bringing forward a resolution and having a full conversation about what is the vision for the Civic Center and what is the best way that we can approach and ensure that the success of the Civic Center. So I appreciate again the comments from the staff. I think the feedback that I've been hearing is that there is certainly some value to some of these boards, but I think I would agree that we should take a look. We should have a further conversation in the coming month about how to handle the Civic Center board.
Thank you. Well, Director and the city manager, I think we are talking, and I think we should continue to discuss this. At this point, I'm not in favor of the resolution. I think we can still find out the direction of the Civic Center board, where they're going, what do they hope to move forward in the future. So at this point, I'm not in favor of the resolution. Any other comments?
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, I would add, I think what we're looking for here on this question is if there is a consensus on the commission to move forward with providing the city manager direction on putting together a resolution to do with the Civic Center board. Having watched this process, I would agree with the comments made by my fellow commissioners. I think we have a lot of boards who do an excellent job in the city, and I think we do have a lot of dedicated members on all of our boards. However, I think it is time to look at efficiencies. As you heard from Director Panozzo, between 28 and 30 hours per month on boards is something that is significant that we need to look towards, especially in times of budget restrictions and making sure that we are operating with our taxpayer dollars at the utmost efficiency. So I would concur that we do need to continue the conversation and we do need to put together a resolution.
While I understand, but we have some avenues that we are supposed to be going through. Like the director said that, there were some comments that were talking about instead of burdening the employees, we could also look at board director agendas. They control the agenda, they control the admin, and then that will alleviate some of the problems with the city employees. So while that discussion is going on, I don't think we should jump the gun and start moving forward with resolution and all of that.
And Mr. Mayor, that's a fair point. And when I brought up the question of the Civic Center, I was more looking for people's thoughts on it. I actually can elaborate a little bit on my thoughts because the Civic Center for me is not related solely to efficiencies. It's not related solely to staff time. It's a broader issue that's emerged with the Civic Center, and I've watched it over 6 years on this commission now. But I guess part of it, I had some questions for the city attorney and maybe Ms. Pinozo, but probably the city attorney. So, Mr. Joden, am I right in understanding that until at least early this year, the Civic Center Board had access to city monies in a bank account?
Mayor Collins, Commissioner Halliday, I think that's partially correct. My understanding and recollection was that the Civic Center Board had access to money that was funds they generated from some of their events, and that they did write and withdraw checks from that account. And that was up until about middle of March of this year.
And was that city money?
I think technically it would be considered city money because although it was generated by the Civic Center Board, it was for events conducted at the Civic Center.
And so we had private citizens who had access to money that was otherwise city funds.
Correct.
And what about with regard to contracts? Has the Civic Center Board entered into contracts outside of the city attorney's office or manager process?
Mayor Collins, Commissioner Halliday, there are a number of, let me back up and start. My understanding is the Civic Center has a couple of events that the Civic Center Board, I apologize for not knowing the intimate details, but runs these events from the Civic Center Board itself with, and I'm not quite sure what the involvement of city staff is down at the Civic Center. City does, in recent years, has tried to develop, application agreements for the use, vendor agreements. Historically, none of those were city approved and raised some liability concerns over the use of the Civic Center facility and the ballroom in terms of what those vendors were agreeing to. And exactly, and mainly around the lack of indemnification and insurance by the vendors and review of that. There was also a few years ago we did and started to bring the fees charged by the Civic Center to the commission. Historically, I'm not sure if those were always brought to the commission, but the general point being there was some operational issues. The Civic Center being a city-operated facility, and some of the liability concerns weren't being addressed through at least these two, I think just two Civic Center oriented or Civic Center Board oriented and organized events.
So, Mr. Joden, you mentioned fee setting, and my understanding is that the Civic Center Board was delegated at some point some level of fee setting by the City Commission back in the 1980s, and then some additional powers as well. All city boards, do they have to comply with open meeting laws?
Mayor Collins, Commissioner Halliday, they do.
And so if they're engaging in rate setting or rule setting or any form of quasi-judicial or quasi-legislative process, do they have to comply with state law and public meeting laws?
Mayor Collins, Commissioner Halliday, I would certainly recommend that.
And if they break the law or violate those rules, who's on the hook for those violations? The Civic Center Board individually or the taxpayers of the City of Helena?
Mayor Collins, Commissioner Halliday, I believe the City of Helena, City Commission would ultimately be held liable because it's a body delegated authority in the early 80s by the City Commission. And looking over prior memos and discussions we've had with my predecessor at MMIA, and that's for the folks who don't know, that's the Montana Municipal Interlocal Authority. That's the cities, all the cities in Montana. I think there's only one or two that don't participate. The risk retention pool. They consider the Civic Center to be under their general memorandum of coverage. So any actions that the Civic Center Board or any of the other advisory boards would be held to the city.
And so when the Civic Center Board is holding a public meeting and it's being staffed by either staff of the Civic Center or Parks and Recreation at this point, are those staff acting as employees of the City of Helena?
Mayor Collins, Commissioner Halliday, that's correct.
Is it legal in the state of Montana for city boards, city advisory bodies to engage in either electioneering or politicking during official board meetings?
Mayor Collins, Commissioner Halliday, I haven't spent a lot of time, haven't seen specific allegations, but I would note that it is a cause for concern that if that advisory boards are engaging in unethical behavior, and as by way of background, the city or the state ethics rules prohibit public officers, public employees from using public time, facilities, equipment, supplies, or funds to solicit support for or opposition to any nomination or election of any person to public office or the passage of any ballot issue. Now, I don't know whether, and I haven't spent very much time into whether that applies, public officer or public employee applies to advisory boards, but given our previous discussion that advisory boards are under the guise and authority of the city commission, if they were alleged to have violated this, it does cause some concern as to whether the city would be held liable for that violation. Beyond that, it's probably not an appropriate function of an advisory body, regardless of whether state law prohibits it or not.
Is it legal for Helena City staff to engage in electioneering or politicking during official board meetings?
No, it is not legal.
And so, Commissioners, the reason I'm asking these questions specific to the official meetings is that looking at the Civic Center board meeting minutes from September 10th of this year, during the President's report, the board discussed that, quote, if there are no changes to the commission, there is a fear that many board members will not be reelected in March. You know, when I read that, I was concerned. I said, well, we have individuals who are volunteers in this city. They want to be on this board. Over the past few months, though, in what I've observed of the Civic Center board and then watching them basically get to this point of crossing the line in terms of what appears to me to be a potential ethics violation in violation of Title II of state law, it's just no longer acceptable. This board opposed a movement to the Parks Department. I think it was ill-advised, but it was an advisory capacity on their part to say that. I think they confused people and stirred up problems in a manner that certainly wasn't effective in supporting the city of Helena and the Helena Civic Center and our goals for programming going forward. They picked a fight in that process with the Helena Symphony, and I sort of stopped and said, honestly, who picks a fight with the Helena Symphony? It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I have gotten reports from staff, and I'm not going to put them on the spot, that the board is uncivil to them. There are people who don't want to attend those meetings or people who have to go in order to protect staff members from facing the brunt. When I put all of that together, plus again, what I'm looking at here, and this isn't a report to me, this is the minutes of their board meeting reported by a City of Helena employee. And I'm looking at a potential violation of Title II, which ultimately accrues to a violation of the City of Helena if somebody wanted to go ahead and make a complaint against the board or against this city for participating in the opposition or support of candidates in election. I in no way can countenance this board continuing to exist in its current form, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for indulging me.
Mayor,
Go ahead.
in the discussion about moving to parks, I was in favor of it because, as I explained, and both in a written letter to the board and to the public and at the commission meeting, that my longtime concern with the Civic Center was the fact that the board, and I always acknowledge the good work they have done, but there was a strong commitment to the building of the Civic Center, and the point I was trying to make is that there are two aspects to this in order to make the Civic Center a continuing vital part of the community, which is both the city taking the responsibility for the upkeep of the building and the historic importance that it plays, but also at the same time offering an ongoing vitality to the programming and to the use of the building to engage a broad audience as possible. Now, I dealt with the board over 35 years or more, and the same issue reoccurred all the time, that gradually the stress on the building, or what was seen as putting stress on the building, continued to put regulations and stumbling blocks towards use of the building for programming. So that across from about the late 80s, 90s, into this century, there were less and less programming going on. And the programming was surrounded by both fee structure and also regulations that made it difficult to bring in a lot of the types of programming that would appeal to a broad base of the audience. What became a lot of the programming was safe programming that put little effort on staff or on the building. And that resulted, as it does over and over again across the country, in kind of a mediocrity or a limited amount of programming. That issue has never been heard, and it wasn't heard in this last discussion. My being a proponent of moving into parks was that would help that, but because that meant that I was in favor of something that the board wasn't, over a long period of time, it was accused of attacking or all kinds of things, none of which the minutes of the meetings could do, or what I wrote, because I made it clear. I just feel that programming needed to be crucial to how we make not only the Civic Center a vital entity for the community, but for its survival. In the last 8 years, even prior to my being on the commission started to become concerned about the amount of money that from the general fund that was put into it. And I always saw that as a danger, because that meant that maybe at some time it would seem to be too costly. And the only way that that was going to be solved was through better programming that brought in more income. Kind of against the desire of the board, the city commission did push, even again before I came here, and then in the time that I've been here, for a reevaluation of that programming and the fees, and to create a fee structure that would allow more use. So some of that did happen, but it was resisted throughout, and that I don't see that will ever change. If the Parks Department is going to find a way to create vital programming that addresses a broad base of the community, it is not going to, in terms of the historic actions or the philosophical base that has been represented there by the same people for years and years. So, however, I do think it's something that should come to the commission, and whether it comes now at a later date, I think that everyone needs to keep that in the forefront, that the Civic Center will only survive if not only does it have the support of the city to keep the building vital, but it also has programming that embraces and builds a larger audience in the community than is presently there.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any others? Just to close this, Commissioner Halliday, I want you to know that you brought us some points that were pretty alarming, I hadn't heard about. And yes, but I'm still of the opinion that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Can we find ways to make the facility functional? I think we could. And that's why I remain of the opinion that we should continue to work. We should continue to work with the bodies. Maybe we need to put some parameters in place that will alleviate some of the issues we have there. Because, I myself see some of the issue. I've never heard of a board that has, that does not have a term limit. Some of those things can be put into place because having a board without a term limit, it gives I don't know what it gives the board or what it gives the public, but those are things that we need to look at instead of just dissolving it.
Mr. Mayor, just for the benefit of the public that's here tonight, I do want to clarify based on this conversation. I think that there has been quite a bit of misinformation and rumor that has been disseminated around the community with regard to the Civic Center. And I wanted to make it clear that no matter what happens with the board, the Civic Center is not going to close. The Civic Center will not be torn down. These are things that I've had people actually come up to me and say, I heard you voted to tear down the Civic Center. That is patently untrue. It is false. I can't imagine that an icon like the Civic Center in the Helena community would ever be torn down, or that anyone serving on the commission would ever try to do a disservice that would make the Civic Center not efficient and not continue to be a jewel of our community. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows what we're talking about is an advisory board. It is not whether or not the Civic Center will remain open, or whether it will close, or whether it will be torn down. Again, I just want to make that clear for everyone in the room. Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification. I think it was timely. Appreciate it. Okay. Any other comments?
So commissioners, just for my understanding, just to make sure that my notes are accurate, so are you what's the direction you're giving us at this point on this topic?
Well, my recommendation had been that direction to draft a resolution and to bring it forth to the commission at the manager's call to propose the solution of the Civic Center Board.
Well,
Mr. Mayor, commissioners, so if indeed we draft, it doesn't mean that you're going to accept. You can still reject. So that's the part that I'm trying to be clear. Right now, we cannot take any official vote or position on this matter. It's not an item in the agenda. We can bring to you a resolution, which at that point you can thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever it may be.
And Mayor, may I just add, I think it makes sense, to again, at the discretion of the city manager, move forward with a potential resolution. I think it also doesn't preclude further conversations with this board, right? I think some of the information that we've walked through tonight poses some significant problems for the city, and I think this board has an opportunity to talk through. I know that they are providing public comment through the open survey that is online right now. They can continue to do that. We will take all that feedback into consideration. Ultimately, if there's a way to move forward, I think, we still have that ability to look at ways to further the conversation with this body.
I hear you, but I still say, why the rush? Why not continue the conversation? That's where I'm at, where.
Mayor, if I may, I mean, so when I started 2 years ago, I know that Commissioner Noonan had brought forward the idea of term limits. That was not the first time. I know the Helena Citizens Commission has weighed in on the issue of term limits, and this board continues to resist any changes. So if there is a willingness to come forward and talk through in a productive way what's best for the Civic Center moving forward, I'm certainly open to that. To date, that hasn't been the case. So the consensus, I think, tonight that we want the city manager to look at a potential resolution doesn't preclude further conversations in the interim. So I welcome that conversation, and I hope that there's a willingness to put the Civic Center's success and future at the forefront of those conversations, which to date hasn't been the case.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, forgive me, I'm still a little confused as to what the next step is. We're used to dealing with consensus. Clearly, we don't have it. So a suggestion would be that actually this item be voted on. Unfortunately, Mr. Jordan, you can correct me, it is not in the agenda, and therefore the vote would have to take place at a different time.
No, we'll go with consensus. That's okay. The consensus here.
Okay, so consensus to bring you a resolution that will continue to reflect any input that we receive, whether it's through conversations, through listening sessions, through surveys, and so on and so forth, at the best possible time, which at this point, we don't have another meeting in November, so it will have to be in December.
Yes, Commissioner.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, just a question for the city manager. So when you're talking about needing consensus, do you need that to be unanimous, or do you need a majority of the commission?
I think it's majority.
Mayor Collins, Commissioners, Commissioner Wick, in the past, we've generally treated instruction to the city manager to proceed with something as a majority of the commission.
Okay. Based on the comments here this evening, I think that we do have consensus.
Thank you. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Communications from Helena Citizens Council.
Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, we had an election on November 5th. We are still discussing what the final results of that are. We were trying to fill 28 slots. We have 7 districts. Each district has 4 representatives. Not all of those slots had candidates in them. And in fact, of the 28, 11 were relying on write-in votes. So that proved to be kind of exciting. With some of the write-in votes, it was really easy to figure out who the 4 people were who won, or combining the people that actually had applied to run for that and the people who got the largest number of write-in votes. It wasn't so easy with 4 of the slots. There were just ties. And so we have not resolved those yet, but we have a deadline of tomorrow to resolve them. So we have come up with a method, which is basically the method that we use to appoint people to the council when in between elections. And we are going to, the Lewis and Clark election office has been, as always, amazing and extremely helpful for us. So they figured out, of all those write-ins, how many of those people actually live in the district that they have been written in for, because I'm assuming a lot of those people didn't write themselves in, somebody else did. Mickey Mouse and some of those ones have been pulled out, and they've figured out the other people who don't have an address in that district, and so we've narrowed it down to some reasonable numbers. For most of them, it'll be real easy. Four of the districts are easy. They're already, we could figure it out. But for the other 3, one of them has has a tie of 2 people, and so we'll have to call those people up and see, do they really want the position? And if they really want the position, we have a very easy questionnaire that we give them and get some idea of what their motivation is and so on, and what their background is. Another one has an empty spot, and 7 people we're going to have to call to see, asking the same questions. And then we will do what we normally do, which is just the people who are already in that district talk about, well, you know, of these 7, or in one case of these 15, these ones sound like the ones that probably would fit in the best. And then we will just notify them. Okay?
Thank you.
No questions?
And Mayor and
Yes.
Commissioners, just a little bit of piggyback on that and add clarification. There was some question and discussion on who would have the ultimate authority of appointing, breaking those ties. I talked with Mr. Sharp, Sumner Sharp. I visited with the county attorney's office. We're all in agreement that the statute that we were relying upon does not apply to the HCC in the first place. So we're just, ultimately, it will not come back to the City Commission for appointment. The HCC will go through the process they use for vacancies to break these ties and move forward from there.
Okay,
And thank you very much for doing that.
thanks for the clarification. Okay, regular items. Consider a resolution relating to $2,754,000 wastewater system revenue bond, DNRC Water Pollution Control State Revolving Loan Program, Series 2019, authorizing the issuance and fixing the term and condition thereof.
Mayor, Commissioners, this bond resolution before you tonight is to fund the extension of wastewater and water infrastructure out to the west end into that newly annexed area where they're having septic issues. It's a 20-year bond at 2.5%. Annual payments will range between $173,000 and $178,000 due each July and January. If you accept this resolution and pass it tonight, we tentatively scheduled a closing date for December 17th and first drawdown of funds. Questions?
Comments from the commission?
Ms. Hurst, when we are making the debt service payments on this, until such time that someone taps in and begins paying for that, who's making that?
Yes, the property owners, as they tap into that infrastructure, will be charged their proportionate share. But until such time as they do that, yes, the city will be making those payments from the wastewater enterprise fund.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments? Comments from the public? Thank you.
Mayor, I'll move approval of a resolution relating to $2,754,000 wastewater system revenue bond, DNRC Water Pollution Control State Revolving Loan Program, Series 2019, authorizing the issuance and fixing the terms and conditions thereof.
Second.
Any other discussion? Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Halliday?
Aye.
Commissioner Wicks?
Aye.
Commissioner Noonan?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Loughlin?
Aye.
Mayor Collins?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Mayor, Commissioners, the second resolution regarding these wastewater bonds is a housekeeping resolution to bring our old wastewater bonds up to the same language as the current issue. It makes it easier for both DNRC and us to monitor these bonds and make sure we're in compliance if the compliance issues are the same on all issues. So that's what this second resolution does. Questions?
Questions from the commission? Public?
Mayor, I'll move to approve a resolution amending and restating all prior wastewater revenue financing resolutions and wastewater system revenue bonds issued prior to 2019.
Second.
Any other discussion? Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Halliday?
Aye.
Commissioner Wicks?
Aye.
Commissioner Noonan,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Loughlin,
Aye.
Mayor Collins.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
The third one, consider first passage of an ordinance allowing certain encroachment by right of amending Chapter 13 of Title 7 of the Helena City Code and setting a public hearing date of December 9th, 2019.
Mayor, Commissioners, Irene O'Connor, Deputy City Attorney for the record. So before you tonight, you do have an ordinance amendment for allowing certain encroachments by right. This was another kind of efficiencies that we were looking at in our office. We found that we do quite a few of these agreements, and although the number might not sound very large, they do interrupt the workflow of our office. We also found in reviewing these that not a lot of review goes into it, and generally these encroachments the city allows without much considerations, and they don't impede city operations because we can always remove them if they do come into conflict with city projects. So to save some time, this is a proposed amendment to the ordinance to list those particular encroachments by right without a need for any application or review process by the city. Those are retaining walls, fences, awnings and overhangs, and the other big one is any portion of a structure such as a foundation, roof, eave, stoop, and stairs that are in existence as of the date of the passage of this particular ordinance. And this is to address all of the encroaching old construction in the city. There's a lot of houses that do encroach on alleys and other right-of-way that before we have our current regulations are in place. And we would have to do agreements for those every time somebody sold a house. And we just decided it's probably better to just allow them to exist. However, no new construction will be allowed to encroach. And other than that, the ordinance just cleans up some language. It specifies that it does not create a property right for anybody to put such an encroachment in the right-of-way, and it also specifies that we can always remove it on 60 days' notice, as well as perform any necessary maintenance or emergency activities in the right-of-way without any notice, so the city can continue operating, even if somebody's fence would have to be removed on occasion. But I'm happy to answer any questions, but this is basically just a cleanup ordinance for us.
Thank you. Questions from the commission?
I guess maybe one question. Do you, to the city attorney's office, is this something that other municipalities typically do, that they just allow the encroachment by right and for that to transfer?
Mayor Collins, Commissioner O'Loughlin, I know Bozeman allows them.
Okay.
I'm not sure what Missoula, Great Falls, Kalispell's a little bit smaller and isn't a self-governing power to begin with, so.
And then Mayor, just one other question. Do we ever, as a commission, allow the encroachment, or the city to allow the encroachment, but with conditions on it, or is it typically you allow it or not allow it?
Mayor Collins, Commissioner O'Loughlin, it is very, very rare that I see conditions placed on it. And usually, if there's a need for a condition, it begs the question as to whether it should be granted. Usually, the one or two that I can think of is it's a sight distance issue, which it shouldn't be allowed in the first place because it blocks visibility for motor vehicles and pedestrians, and or it is over or creates issues with city utilities, which they usually are not in these extra right-of-way locations. Sometimes you just have really wide right-of-way, or the street and sidewalk, if there is a sidewalk, isn't centered within the right-of-way, so you have a bunch of extra on one side.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments? Public comments? Madam Clerk?
Mayor, I can go ahead and make the motion.
Yeah.
I'll move to approve first passage of an ordinance allowing certain encroachments by right by amending Chapter 13 of Title 7 of the Helena City Code and setting a public hearing date of December 9, 2019.
Second, Mayor.
Any other discussion? Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Halliday?
Aye.
Commissioner Wicks?
Aye.
Commissioner Noonan?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Loughlin?
Aye.
Mayor Collins?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Public hearings. Consider a revised ordinance adding industrial wastewater regulation by amending Title VI, Chapter 6 of the Helena City Code. Mr. Leland?
Thank you, Mayor Commission. This is just, we've brought this in front of we've brought this in front of the commission a few times. It is update to our ordinance for the pre-treatment ordinance that has come forward. This is coming from an EPA audit that came down, looked at our pre-treatment, gave us recommendations so that we stay in compliance with the pre-treatment laws that are out there. And so based on the recommendations from EPA, there's some minor changes that we do a little more enforcement, and we have better definitions to come closer to what EPA says it is. So these are just the changes, and we are going to be in compliance with EPA if we adopt this at this time. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Leland. Any comments from the commission? Comments from the public? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to approve final passage of an ordinance amending industrial wastewater regulations by amending Title VI, Chapter 6 of the Helena City Code.
Second.
Final discussion? Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Halliday?
Aye.
Commissioner Wicks?
Aye.
Commissioner Noonan?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Loughlin?
Aye.
Mayor Collins?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Consider final passage of an ordinance amending the Downtown Urban Renewal District and the boundaries thereof, adopting the Rodney Street Downtown Urban Renewal District, including tax increment provision pursuant to Title 7, Chapter 15, Part 42 and 43, MCA. Madam Hagan.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, for the record, my name is Sharon Haugen. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Helena. This evening, for your consideration, we will be asking you to consider the final passage of an ordinance that will amend the Downtown Urban Renewal District and to include the Rodney Street area. This district, the Downtown Urban Renewal District, was initially passed by the Commission in October 29, 2018. I'm not quite sure what's happening up there.
Tell us.
But at the time that the Commission passed the Downtown Urban Renewal District, they asked staff to consider a Rodney Street addition. So this past year, the city staff has been working with WGM, our consultant, to put together an amendment to the Downtown Urban Renewal Plan. We've had, as a course of public outreach, we've had 2 community meetings. With those 2 community meetings, we sent a letter of notification to all the property owners listed with the Department of Revenue to include in that. We also did flyers out in the neighborhoods. We did Facebook, and we did the website. We also did the farmers market and had some meetings down there several times. We have had a planning board meeting, and as we indicated last month or at the last meeting, the planning board did go review the amendment, and in their mind, that amendment is compliant with the downtown master neighborhood plan, we're calling it, in the growth policy, and they recommended approval by the city commission. For this public meeting, we sent a notice to all the property owners in the amendment, but we also sent the additional letters to all the property owners in the Downtown Urban Renewal District, since technically this does affect them too. To date, we received 3 letters. One was speaking in favor, one was speaking against, and the second one was a letter similar to what we got with the Downtown Urban Renewal District, asking for certain members to be on the board and to consider the historic context of Rodney Street in addition to the downtown. When we adopted the Downtown Urban Renewal Plan, we made some changes to the advisory group to help addressed some of the concerns that Ms. Hurdle had, and we established that downtown advisory group. So this evening is the culmination of many steps of the process. Just really briefly, we've been through a resolution of necessity. We did a statement of blight, but let me remind everybody that the statement of blight is just merely a statutory requirement, and that could mean many things. It might mean the obvious about buildings, but it also means how badly streets are laid out. It also includes how land was subdivided. There's a myriad of things that the state law allows. They just said you have to do a statement of blight. So we've been through the process. After the statement of blight, we developed the plan. We've made the plan available. We've had it with the planning board. We've had it in front of the commission earlier when you did first passage. So this evening, we are asking that you consider final passage of this this amendment to the Rodney Street Urban Renewal District. The Rodney Street Urban Renewal District, and if I could get the map up there, goes along Rodney Street from 6th down to Pine. And it has a blend of residential, commercial, and many other opportunities for redevelopment, but also further development. Some of the goals of the plan speak to getting the unique character, keeping the unique character of the district by recognizing it also has deep connections to the downtown. It also asks for redevelopment of underutilized properties or properties that are currently vacant. Certainly streetscape and sidewalks and infrastructure are a concern, as we know from earlier meetings this summer on Rodney Street. So those are some of the goals of the plan. The planning board is recommending you adopt it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
If I
Thank
could
you,
also,
Director Hogan.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, if I could also add the fact that you have an updated ordinance on desk, and so there's also a change to the composition of the Downtown Urban Renewal Area Tax Increment Financing and Advisory Board, which is the item that we had moved earlier from the consent calendar.
And just to clarify, Mayor, I think we'll take that up. We still have to move that subsequent to this public hearing. Is that correct?
So
Yeah,
the
okay.
item that is currently in the agenda as 12B first, and then the item that was in the consent calendar for D.
And Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I also understand that Commissioner Halliday did prepare some amendments to set up the advisory group, or the changes in the advisory group, and I think some of those may be distributed to the audience.
Yeah, maybe if I can just explain that. So I sat down to look at the advisory group and unfortunately couldn't really get the number under 14 when we were trying to get in all of the interests that we were trying to fit in there along with what our original goals had been. And unfortunately, to get it to that number, it would have been a problem with the existing plan, which said we can only have 11 board members. And so what this current proposed ordinance does is would allow us to, while we amend the plan, if we amend the plan to include the Rodney area, we'll also allow the city commission to, instead of ordering us the type of individuals that can be on the board, it will allow us to appoint an advisory committee and won't specify, and then that would be a subsequent resolution we would take up with the specific categories of individuals, backgrounds that we would want substantively to be on that board. Sorry, it was kind of confusing, but we were just trying to get two motions done, and the city attorney helped out in trying to simplify the confusion that I might have provoked.
Thank you. Other discussion from the commission? Comments from the public? Sir.
Commissioners and Mayor Collins, my name is Paul Piccini. I'm a resident of the this area, the addition area to the downtown urban development district. And I have a couple questions. One, well, first of all, from what I know of this effort, I like it. I think should be a real boost to the community. But I just want to understand it. And I'm a little confused about the advisory board and board of directors, and maybe Commissioner Halliday would be the one to ask, but they're not the same, right? The advisory board and the board of commissioners are two different groups of people?
So I don't know if, Mr. Mayor, it's up to you if you want to take questions and make this a back and forth, if you want to catalog questions, and we'll just resolve them at the end for ease.
Well, we'll have to put parameters around it. So how many questions you have?
2.
Commissioner Halliday, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, as long as we're going to do that for everyone for the entire evening, and if we have 50 public comments. I think we should take the questions. I will ask those questions to our staff and clarify them if that's okay. But I don't want us to have a back and forth all night, frankly. No, sorry, Paul. It's just,
So,
it becomes a
Pacini,
full-blown discussion.
So when would a person have questions like this answered? Or how?
So the way we do public comment is you can ask your questions. No one's going to answer the questions. We will ask the questions if a commissioner feels so inclined at the end of it, but we don't do a back and forth because it turns into a back and forth exactly like we're having right now, and we never get anywhere tonight. There just have to be some parameters on public comment.
Thank you for your time.
Mayor, sorry, Mr. Pacini, if you could ask your questions in your public comment, after public comment is over, we'll go ahead and seek the answers to those questions after public comment is over, if that makes sense. So if you want to just raise the topics that you wanted, then after we close public comment, we can see if we can provide some clarity on those questions, if that makes sense.
On a one-to-one basis.
Following the public, so that everybody has the opportunity to get their public comment out, and then afterwards, during the commission conversation, we often are able to tease out the answers to those questions.
Okay, so first of all, my first question was to clarify my understanding of the advisory board versus the board of directors, I guess, is that the correct name for them? Are they the same people? That's my first question. Second of all, I want to clarify in this new addition to the downtown urban development district, would that new district have representation in the form of a member of the board or in some other way? How would representation be provided? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pacini. Any other comments?
Mayor, Commissioner, I'm Rex Seeley. I currently have properties and a business in the current URD, the downtown URD. I'm also a board member on the Business Improvement District. We're encouraged by this Business Improvement District and myself that this is going on because it's an area of high affordable housing. This will help add to the infrastructure and improvements of an area that needs it, and we're really encouraged by seeing this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments?
Good evening, I'm Gina Satterfield. I do have a business on Rodney. Since there's some more people here, I would like to let everybody know that when you had the presentation at the Myrna Loy, what happened was I put in a few words that were on those boards, and then what we were told that you wanted this Rodney Street to look like Portland, Oregon, and that you wanted the sidewalks to look nice. Well, we don't drive on the sidewalks, and we're lucky we have sidewalks. A lot of places in town don't have sidewalks. What I'm trying to get across here is that when I put in those key words, and I put in Portland, Oregon on my phone. In that same month, which was in August, it said the headlines in Portland were the end of single-family dwelling. Now, why this is so important is when city manager decided to change the names of these agencies or the department heads and then run off 75% of those people to consolidate, where we don't have any opinion whatsoever. What that does through Agenda 21 in 2030, it invites the public-private partnerships of the world to come in and set up a global governance at a local level. Localism. So those public-private partnerships aren't going to pay those taxes. It falls on the taxpayer because they're too busy taking up property and having it ran by a 501c3 or a redevelopment agency. I want to know what I want you to understand what you're in store for. If you have to rack them, pack them, and stack them, and then you can't afford to put your car or to drive your car or park your car in time, which is what happens, this is what Helena has to look forward to. And we're going to have huge issues because if you don't have single-family dwelling, and then you don't have small businesses because you can't afford the taxes for the rest of the world to come in and set up shop cheaply. That's all I have to say. And who's going to pick these boards? Who's going to pick them? And are they going to be your cronies, your buddies? I don't know. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Where are we?
Commissioners, Mayor, my name is Fred Sargison. I didn't plan to come to speak tonight, but I just found out about this recently, just moved back to town after being gone for a while. I was born in St. John's, live a block away on Spencer, and I'm wildly enthusiastic about the opportunity to sort of preserve and build upon this wonderful neighborhood that I love dearly, have known my whole life. We have to have some faith in our community expressing their wants and desires, some faith in Helena as a community sort of making smart decisions, and I think we will. I think there's a lot of engagement, a lot of involvement. It can go awry, but it can also go exceedingly well, and I think something's necessary to incent the investment in that neighborhood to make sure that it remains this sort of vital, great piece of Helena history. So I'm excited to see what happens.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments? Discussion?
My name's Kathy Cook. I've lived on Rodney Street. I've raised 2 sons on Rodney Street. I've lived there for 26 years. I've bought a house from my girlfriend that's over 100 years old. The only reason I had to buy that house is because I could not get any other help I was homeless with 2 boys. So I moved into my girlfriend's house, and now you might tax me out of it. And I have $3,000 left to pay on that house. And I've worked my whole life, 2 jobs, to get that house to raise my kids. And now I might be taxed out and lose it. And I don't think that's fair. I know that things need to be improved, and that's true. There's a lot to be improved. But my home has been my boys' home also, and now my boys have grandkids. I have grandkids that are going to be raised there too. And I might lose it because I'm a retired person. I'm not going to go back to work. I'm raising my grandkids. So I need, I just want you to know that it needs help, but don't tax me out of my home. I really wouldn't. I have no place to go. I'd be homeless again. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other questions, comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the final passage of an ordinance amending the boundaries of the Downtown Urban Renewal District and the Downtown Urban Renewal District Plan to include the Rodney Street Study Area, including a tax increment provision pursuant to Title VII, Chapter 15, Parts 42 and 43, Montana Code Annotated.
Second, and a couple of questions, maybe, Mr. Mayor, before we go any further. So, Ms. Haugen, we've had a few questions that came up. First has to do with the distinction between the advisory board and what I'm assuming then is the board of directors of the Business Improvement District. But can you comment on what an advisory body is for an urban renewal district, its role with this specific district, and then if you wouldn't mind then going on to that question of representation, which I know we're coming to in the next motion, but.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. So the TIF Advisory Board function for this plan, and as it has in other districts, is a board that will take the idea of the different projects and will be recommending to the City Commission which ones would most suit the goals and the objectives of the plan. So when I talked a little bit earlier about such things as street improvements, redevelopment of properties, those are the types of things that tax increment finance could help assist in. So this board will be advisory to the City Commission on how best to spend this tax increment money. The idea of having this Rodney Street Amendment also invites the opportunity for a representative, or as resolution I think is drafted for further consideration, to have 2 representatives from Rodney Street. I stand corrected if I'm wrong, just to make sure that Rodney Street area will be represented. It also has a broader variety of different types of people in the community, like business owners, property owners, I believe the Lewis and Clark County, the MBAC, and the HBID. So I don't know if I answered your question, Commissioner Halliday. If not, I'd be happy to.
That did, Ms. Haugen. And it is 2 representatives specifically located. That's either a property owner, a business owner, their representative, or a resident located in the Rodney Street study area. Another question for you that came up in some of the comments just now, and I'm going to ask you to answer this one for me in one word if you can. Does adopting a tax increment financing district around or amending our plan to put the Rodney Street district in, does that tax increment financing district raise someone's taxes?
Oh, no, it doesn't, Commissioner Halliday. That was 3 words. I apologize.
It's close enough.
I was wondering, Mayor, if Ms. Cossett is in the audience, if I could potentially ask her a question. So, Ms. Cossett, maybe you can introduce yourself, and then I have just one question as it relates to the plan that WGM put together.
Mayor, Commissioners, my name is Ann Cossett. I'm a land use planner. I work for WGM Group.
Thank you. Ms. Cossett, first of all, thank you for all your work on this plan. I think it is helpful, and it gives such a breadth of the history of the Rodney neighborhood, the uniqueness of that area, and then also, you know, some potential ideas for what the vision is for that area. So I appreciate the work that went into this. One question I just had, just in your experience with urban renewal districts and tax increment financing districts, particularly as we're looking to amend this existing urban renewal district, if you have thoughts about ways that we can ensure we're thinking about both the downtown area as well as the Rodney area and the connectivity within those two areas as we're thinking about this as one district. And I know that's a pretty open-ended question, but just since you're here, if you have thoughts on what we as a commission should be keeping in mind. I think representation on the board is one piece of that, but if you have other thoughts on things that we should be thinking about as you've done both the study of the downtown and the Rodney, just thinking about that whole area holistically.
So as far as an amendment goes and the connectivity, just in terms of the process and the way it was, how it was this neighborhood, unlike say the Railroad District, didn't have an active planning group. They didn't have a strong they had no members, residents of this proposed amendment area that were in the Helena Citizens Council. And so we held a focus group and to find out generally what the vision might be. And that was very important. About 12 people came to that. It was truly focused in the questions that were asked. You ask questions and then there's discussion among the people there, so it was very little presentation. And it was very clear that the people who were there had felt that they were a little bit different than downtown and they want to retain that identity. But there are definite connections. Obviously, people from downtown come up to the Myrtle Loy, and people from all over town come in to use the city facilities at the courthouse there. So they wanted to retain their own identity, which is why this amendment is not just making edits to the existing plan. It's like the standalone sub-plan. And then the last chapter of that talks about what actually really needs to change in the existing plan. And to clarify something, at least based on comments that were held at the second open house, I think it was the second one, that was one of the, so it was originally, they definitely wanted representation on the advisory committee. That came out of the focus group and was carried through. But they also, at the second open house, there was a recommendation that at least, and what was recommended that at least two of the members on the advisory committee for the whole district come from the Rodney area, but it was a recommendation that one of those at least be a resident, and that changes in the draft that's currently before you, or the final that's before you now. So, and connections, other connections, I think physical connections, clearly the potential for improving and increasing additional housing in downtown along Cruz spills over into that area around Cutler where there are a fair amount of vacant lots already. But the intent was to keep both single family and, the area's always had a lot of multifamily. And then the physical connections with better pedestrian connections between the Rodney area and downtown. So we have the tunnel, but there's no sidewalks on Cutler that go all the way in, and even better connections to and through Fire Tower Park.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Commissioner?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just some comments on the amendment as a whole. Commissioner O'Loughlin brought this up when we were doing the original downtown urban renewal district as a potential amendment. We went through the district, and then we are now talking about amending this piece in. I think it makes sense when you look at this district. One of the major plans, and I know urban renewal is for many people sort of a bogeyman or a scary statement, because people remember the effects of urban renewal on Helena's downtown historically. It's just unfortunately a catch term that gets used for these type of districts. They're urban renewal districts. One of the main components of this plan is looking at historic preservation. The goal being that we have a lot of older buildings in this area. A lot of them provide housing, multifamily housing, affordable housing. We don't have tools right now in the city's toolbox to deal with those buildings. And if you've lived in the Rodney area, even outside of this zone in the last few years, what you've been seeing is those buildings coming down, not because the owners are demolishing them to put up fancy new houses, but because those houses are reaching the end of their lives And there's no money and there's no resource to do anything with them. And the cheapest, best use of that property is to tear it down and put something else up. That's the status quo. We have no resources to promote that, and those buildings are going to be gone. If you walked by 300 South Rodney recently, which was a beautiful 6-unit or 8-unit apartment building, it's gone. It's demolished. It was no longer structurally sound, and money-wise, it didn't make sense to keep it. And so it's gone. TIF funds will allow future commissions to make those public choices of whether or not there should be a partnership with someone who owns that building to both fix that building and maintain that historic preservation that we want for our community. There's other houses on Miller as you walk by right now that look like they're probably going to be slated for demolition. Our future commission is going to be able to use this increment to encourage the preservation of those housings. Yes, that'll be their choice, but without this money, what you're going to see is these buildings come down as a matter of fact. This makes sense if you're a fan of historic preservation, and you're going to have to trust in future commissions, because when the real money is being generated in this district, the 5 people on this commission aren't going to be sitting there. But this is the only tool that there's going to be for that. Otherwise, the way of the world is that those buildings are going to go away. So, yes, urban renewal is a bad word for a lot of people. The goal of this district is preservation. Another piece is affordability, is finding ways to partner with what's become, in many cases, de facto affordable housing in this area and make sure it remains in that form. Another example property is the northwest corner of Broadway that had a fire. It's slated for potential demolition, and it may go down before there's increment that could potentially help it, but that's how we save these buildings, is by looking for creative tools, and we don't have a lot as municipalities for this type of economic development. So this is a good way to try to assist economic development, housing preservation, historic preservation.
Thank you. Okay, we'll continue with the motion.
Mayor.
Was there a second?
Mayor, Commissioners, just wanted to remind, I think the Halliday Amendment needs a separate motion and an approval, hopefully before you approve final passage, although it would not be fatal. So I'd recommend a commissioner make a motion to amend Ordinance 3275 as indicated on the Halliday Amendment, and that's the ordinances that he spoke about to alter the downtown urban renewal plan to create a little bit more flexibility with the City Commission in creating and appointing the Tax Increment Financing Advisory Board.
So thank you, Mr. Joden. So I'll move to amend the current motion to add what I'll call the Halliday Amendment, and that's in front of you. That's the one that's titled Ordinance Number 3275 on your desk in front of you. And just, is that sufficient, Mr. Joden?
Second, Mayor.
And so just quickly to follow up on what Mr. Joden said, while we're going to get to it in the next action, one of the goals was to get individuals from the Rodney Street neighborhood. Our original plan did not call for that. Also, there were just probably some underrepresentation on the potential advisory board. And so what this amendment does is it amends our plan to allow us to create a board that more correctly meets what we think should be in there, but also ensures that Rodney Street representation.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Halliday?
Aye.
Commissioner Wicks?
Aye.
Commissioner Noonan?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Loughlin?
Aye.
Mayor Collins?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay.
And then I think we still need to move on the final as amended.
Right. So there's resolution establishing a tax increment financing advisory board.
So Mayor, I think we need to, now that we've amended the motion, we need to vote on the motion as amended. So I will move the motion. Do you want me to read through the whole thing again, City Attorney?
You know,
as amended?
if you
Commissioner Wicks already made a motion that was seconded for final passage. If she's comfortable, the commission's already approved the amendment, just amending her motion to include the previously approved amendment.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to amend my earlier
Motion.
Earlier motion to include the approved amendment that Commissioner Holliday put forth.
Second.
Any other discussion? Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Halliday?
Aye.
Commissioner Wicks?
Aye.
Commissioner Noonan?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Loughlin?
Aye.
Mayor Collins?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay. What do we have next?
Yeah, Mayor, Commissioners, do you want to do the golf fees first, which was first on the agenda, or do you want to do the Downtown Urban Renewal Tax Increment Financing Advisory Board, since we've been on that topic? It really doesn't matter, because the golf course fee increase is just a resolution of intention at this point.
Let's do that.
Okay. I will speak to this resolution, Mayor and Commissioners. So the resolution that was included in your packet was to create and appoint 14 individuals for the Downtown Urban Renewal District area and the Rodney Street Study area. After discussions with Commissioner Halliday and the manager, as you just indicated and approved, the commission wanted some flexibility in how that board was appointed, and that some of the designations and categories, classifications of groups within that didn't necessarily match what the commission wanted now and potentially in the future. So we're bringing this forward. The only small amendment I would recommend is the change from one member of Downtown Helena Incorporated, that's DHI, to one representative of Lewis and Clark County, and that would be consistent with the plan that you just amended.
Okay.
And so maybe just commissioners, I'll just comment before we take public comment, but if you look at the language on the previous amendment from 3275, there's a number of cross-outs of individuals who we had wanted in our plan. I think if you look at the proposed resolution of the actual board that we're setting up, it pretty much matches all of those, but adds the Rodney Street representatives, and then a couple of other individuals with a focus on housing. I think we have a historic preservation organization, includes a representative in art, music, or other cultural organization, which has relations between both the Rodney District and the original downtown district. So I think it just fleshed it out. I don't think it changed much. The one county representative is in there because it was in our original plan, and so downtown Helena got removed, but there's a lot of representation between the business improvement district, property owners, residents, and business owners downtown anyway, and so that was the one that appeared to be potentially the most redundant of the group. And I tried to keep it at 14 individuals just because the recommendation for best practice was actually 7, but we just really couldn't get all of the interested parties we needed to get to without going up to closer to 14.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay.
Mayor, may I just
Any
maybe, oh, I'm sorry.
Comments from the public? Commissioner?
Thanks, Mayor. I have a question for Director Haugen. Just as far as the process for appointing these board members, which I think was a topic during public comment as well, what's been the process for say the Railroad District as far as how we've done outreach and then the selection process for the members?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, Commissioner, for the Railroad District, we did outreach by reaching out. If you recall, there's a Midtown group, working with the Midtown group, and also there was specific, like the college was there, so we reached out to the college, to the different entities, to get nominations, but ultimately the city commission was the appointing body on that railroad district. But we reached out to various groups. I would imagine in terms of the downtown, we would do similar types of activities. We know that there's good outreach with HBID, even possibly the Chamber of Commerce and some of the other groups, and also the Rodney Street area. That list of stakeholders that Ms. Cossett talked about would be a good pool to draw from for their representation. And then we also advertise, because there's also people who just are interested that we aren't aware of. So we'd use all those things, and now Facebook too. So.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
So, Mayor and City Attorney, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I was going to take this as one motion with the holiday amendment.
That works.
Okay. So I will move to approve a resolution establishing a tax increment financing advisory board for the downtown urban renewal area as amended with the holiday amendment.
Second, Mayor.
Any final discussion? Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Halliday?
Aye.
Commissioner Wicks?
Aye.
Commissioner Noonan?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Loughlin?
Aye.
Mayor Collins?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay. What's the final one?
Mayor, Commissioners, the final item was the item relating to the resolution of intention to establish fees for the Bill Roberts golf course. The three changes are highlighted in the gray. Now these are existing charges. We just neglected to show an increase in the proposed from $16 to $17 for adding 9 holes, general category, and adding 9 holes for the senior and junior category. And then finally on page 3, changing the gas or electric cart user fee from $165 to $185, and then clarifying there at the bottom of that section that cart storage includes the annual cart user fee.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Comments? Discussion? Public comments? Entertain a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd move to approve the resolution of intention to establish fees to be charged for the Bill Roberts Golf Course for the 2020 season, including the staff amendment as described by Mr. Joden and in front of us tonight.
Second.
Any final discussion? Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Halliday?
Aye.
Commissioner Wicks?
Aye.
Commissioner Noonan?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Loughlin?
Aye.
Mayor Collins?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the public who wants to address the commission?
Greetings, Mayor, Commissioners,
Hello.
members of the staff, and the community of Helena. Boy, I'm amazed I'm actually here. I'm just totally exhausted. I'm used to be a community organizer. I say used to be because I used to be able to get things organized and be pretty effective, but because of disabilities, I'm not quite as effective. As I was sitting in the audience, I had quite a few questions and trying to figure out how to express these so that we can figure out how to get the community to come together. I was at a hometown Helena meeting, and they had a guest there talking about economic opportunities that are available for for different community partnerships. Some of what they were talking about was the possibilities for municipalities to work on the homelessness crisis, as an example. You know, there's a lot of neighborhoods up there, and if the neighborhoods came together and created these proposals, these grant proposals, let's call them, so that we can convert some of these places that the people that aren't homeless are going to lose and become homeless, so that we can make opportunities for them, like low-interest loans or something of that nature. I mean, so those people that the corporations that are on the top and these sponsors that are out there, because there are funds out there. We just need to come together on the table and write up some proposals so that it's not just urban renewal, but we're thinking about the underprivileged, and so that they can have opportunities in our community. I mean, all the resources are out there. All the pieces of the puzzle are out there. We just need them to bring them to the same table so that we can improve our community, because we have some serious problems in our community. And if you need a list of them or details or anything, you know my number. I mean, I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. In fact, tomorrow night, there's going to be an event planned at 7094 Applegate Drive. And I've made some things. I mean, I used to be a whiz at advertising and getting people to show up, but I don't even have an internet connection. You know, and I was living in a place that had mold infestation, and it's ravaged my body. I'm even barely able to stand here in front of you now. I'm a victim with PTSD. Do you know how hard it is to stand in front of this whole council and to talk about the problems that are in our community? It's tough. I don't even know how I'm here. But it's obviously by the grace of God or something, because I am so beat. I'm ready to fall and collapse here right now. But this event, this is an opportunity for the community to bring the crates of lemons that are all over in our community. Because we have a production facility out there to convert all these lemons into lemonade for the community that are dying from thirst. We have problems in our community, serious problems with homelessness. And those homelessness problems also create other problems in our community, like drug addictions, which create homelessness. It's time for us to sit at the table and work these things out as a community. You've heard the expression, it takes a village to raise a child. There's a child in every single one of us. We need to come together as that village and solve these problems. We can't just say they do not exist or it's not our jurisdictions. The previous mayor, Jim Smith, sent me an email because I was working with God's Love about ADA compliance in our community. And he said, you know, I think it'd be a great place if you were to serve on the ADA advisory board. I think that would be an awesome fit. And I agreed with him. That's why I'm on the ADA advisory committee, because I've been working with Montana Independent Living Project and organizations for over 30 years. I've been running a mobile crisis response line in our community for over 3 decades. And do you know who paid for that? I had to work 2 full-time jobs to do this. I had a help desk. People would call me up and they said, I need help. I say, what would you need help with? And then 90% of the time, I went to them. But then I became disabled. I can't do that anymore. I don't have the resources. I don't have the financial resources. I don't have the physical resources. I need some help in saving lives in our community. So anybody that wants to volunteer and stuff like that, I got flyers that are right here. And the mayor has been to the website, the Facebook site. This is what it's all about and even more. If you can please show up, Mayor, we can really change our community in so many ways. And if you're not able to show up yourself, please send somebody there that can touch base so we can solve these problems in our community, because people are dying. And we need to save these people. There's vulnerable people in our community, many, many of them, and they're not getting services. They're falling through the cracks. That's why they're calling me. I've been our community search and rescue for the lost and forgotten, those people that fall through the cracks that don't fit the square program parameters. They come to me and say, how do we do this? And I used to have a whole network of community service providers that when I brought somebody to them, they were able to help me with them. Now they can't. They're oversaturated, they're underfunded, and understaffed. Now I know that the money is out there. We just have to reach out and organize to be able to pull this money back in. There's federal monies, there's county monies. We need to bring those to the neighborhoods because the neighborhoods are hurting. So I have some flyers. Please, at the end of this meeting, come grab them. Let's set up a discussion because we had a roundtable with Senator Tester, the disabled community. And so we're reaching out to Senator Tester to help bridge this gap. We got to build a portal from the neighborhood to the nation, and it has to have those points of connection all the way in between. Let's work together to build a bridge. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Right.
Ladies and gentlemen of the council, Mr. Mayor,
Good
thank you
evening.
for your service to the community, Helena. We appreciate all that you do for us. I'm Jerry Sept. I'm the president of the trustees at the Covenant United Methodist Church. We're located at 2330 East Broadway. We're a small church, approximately 50 to 60 people attend every Sunday. And our clientele at the church are an older demographic. We just received our tax notice, and that tax increase caught us well by surprise. When we plan our budgets, we plan for moderate increases in taxes so that we can, be good servants, pay our taxes, and allow the city of Helena to do their duty to us through that money. Last year, our taxes were $4,834. This year, our taxes are $7,298. That's a 34% increase with no warning. 74% of that tax is for street maintenance. And we've talked to several other churches in the area, and they have the same story. It's our understanding that churches were placed in the same category as businesses. And as you're aware, a business, they get an increase. They can increase their prices on their products a little bit to help compensate for that. As a church, we don't have that luxury. We would ask that the council to take a closer look at how you assess taxes or what grouping you put the churches in as a tax base, and take a look at these increases to see if there is some way that we can get a relief on this 34% tax increase. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else, excuse me, from the public wants to address the commission? Commissioners, any last? At this point, this meeting is adjourned.